I have the honor, the distinct honor, to introduce Sasha Renee Perez, our state senator. So Sasha actually is somebody that most of us know because she's the former mayor of Alhambra. And now she's our new state senator. And I'm not going to enumerate all the issues and causes that Sasha has really been actively engaged in fixing, okay? So she's authored a number of bills in Sacramento. But I wanted to tell you a personal story. A few years back, I needed to call Sasha about an issue. And so I dialed her phone number, and she answered from Paris, France. Now that's a representative of her constituents that's always available. So I won't ever forget that story. But she's been a champion of lots of different issues that are of concern to us. The homeless issue, the education issues, issues having to do with the Latino community. And the exciting thing is she's the youngest member of the Senate at this point, and she's representing our Latinx group. Okay, I wasn't sure about that, but that I was saying it politically correctly. So anyway, without further ado, I would love to have Sasha Renee Perez come up and address us about ICE enforcement issues and what the state is doing. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm excited to be with you all today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Senator Sasha Renee Perez. I was just elected to this seat, to the 25th Senate District, this past November. I began my tenure up in Sacramento on January 6th, and almost immediately after, on January 7th, was navigating the Eaton fire. So it has been nonstop representing this community. There's certainly been a number of issues. My staff likes to joke that I have fought both fire and now ICE. There seems to be, just no end to the kind of sudden and historic events that we've navigated this year. But I really take it as a point of pride that I get to serve in this position and fight back as a member of the California State Senate at a time when I think it's so critical for California to lead, for California to defend democracy, and for California to really show the rest of the nation what it looks like to push back on an authoritarian federal administration. So it's really my great privilege to be able to represent you all up in the state legislature and to do that work. I know today we're going to be talking more about immigration enforcement, and we'll be focusing today's discussion on that. And some of the bills recently that were signed into law just this last weekend that I'll get into in just a bit. Do you want to go to your next slide? This is just an overview of our discussion today. We're going to talk a little bit about our current immigration climate and what that's looked like, some of the numbers and also the impacts we've seen in our community, how our government has responded, both local, state, and federal action, some of our bills that were signed into law, and then some things that we all can do as a community, because I think that that's also really, really critical as well. So just to give you a sense of what ICE activity has looked like, both here in California as well as across the nation, one of the things I think is important to highlight and for us to all talk about with our neighbors, with our family members, is that very few of the people being arrested have any criminal history. Okay, and at a national level, only about 8% of individuals that have been arrested had convictions for violent crimes. Eight. So just to give you a sense, over 92% have no violent crime history. So I think that's an important number to highlight. That's a national number that's really, really important to talk with friends and family about, because this false narrative that the people that are being arrested have criminal convictions, that they are, violent criminals, is completely false. And I want us to continue to reemphasize that. When it comes to California enforcement, we've seen approximately 8,460 ICE raids in California. A majority of those raids have been here in Southern California, and we have seen a number of them here in Senate District 25. A number of them have actually happened here in Pasadena. They've also happened in other parts of my district: Temple City, Rosemead, Alhambra, Monterey Park. Sometimes these things happen so quickly that no one is around to actually document them, and so nobody realizes that the raid has occurred until somebody comes to the business, and suddenly the business seems as though it's in operation. The lights are on, things are moving, but nobody's there. And it's been a very, very eerie experience to see these types of events happen across Los Angeles. We've had the third highest number of immigration arrests, with arrests up 123% compared to last year. So just to give you a sense of how significant we've seen that enforcement increase. And in the Los Angeles region alone, 722 individuals were arrested, but 69%, and I want to emphasize this again, 69% had no criminal convictions. No criminal convictions whatsoever. So once again, as we're talking with friends, as we're talking with family members, really emphasizing that these are people that have no criminal history. We are attacking our neighbors. We are attacking innocent people who are just here trying to make a life for themselves, trying to make a living. And below that, you see this other stat: 58% had never been charged with a crime at all. At all. So these are stats, that we've picked up both from the Los Angeles Times, CBS News, and I think that this is important information we have to continue to emphasize to people, because we see the federal government trying to push a message that is completely false and not based in any sort of data. Now, I want to talk about a little bit of the impact of ICE activity on our communities, because this has really had a ripple effect on our economy. It's had an impact on education, and it's had a mental health impact. And we've already seen some studies done particularly on children. So first and foremost, we've seen a 4.9% decrease in private sector work, over 465,000 jobs lost. We know that immigrants play an integral part of our workforce, not just here in California, but all across the country. And so that ripple effect that we're seeing on our economy is real, and it is causing us an economic crisis, in addition to all of the other things the federal administration has been pushing on us, whether it be these tariffs, now to see huge, huge job losses all across the country. Raids are disproportionately impacting Latino workers. We know that. We've seen folks targeted at car washes. We've seen food vendors be targeted. This is a lot of the workforce that we see that is typically behind the scenes. It's back of house workers at restaurants. It's folks that are washing cars at car washes. These workers that are really a critical part of our economy. They are typically low wage workers, farm workers, people that are doing jobs that also require quite a bit of labor. So losing that workforce has such a tremendous impact on our overall economy. In terms of educational impacts, 5 of our Central Valley districts saw a cumulative 22% increase in student absences following immigration raids this year. The reason why we have some of that information for the Central Valley first is the Central Valley was actually the first one to see raids in California. Some of the first raids that happened were in the Central Valley in January. And after they occurred, we saw hundreds of students and families not go to school in the following days. It had a huge impact on their local school districts. Our local school districts are actually funded based off of students attending schools. That has a direct impact on the funding that our school districts receive. I've actually worked with another assemblywoman, Jasmeet Bains, who brought forward legislation to make sure that school districts are not hurt as a result of these attendance losses, because we know that this is something that is happening in predominantly Latino communities that really, really need these resources. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is something I think we all know and recognize. This has really had a mental health impact on so many. And I could even speak for myself, just seeing these raids happen across communities, to children that look like my family member, to men and women that look like my parents. It has had such a tremendous impact. But our children are also seeing this in real time, whether they're seeing these videos on TikTok, Facebook, they're hearing about it on the news, and they're trying to make sense of what's happening. A report was done by UC Riverside highlighting the significant mental and emotional impact of immigration enforcement on immigrant children and those in mixed status household. And the studies found that separation from caregivers increases the risk of suicidal thoughts, alcohol use, anxiety attacks, and behavioral changes in adolescence. While young children may experience sleep and appetite issues, emotional dysregulation, and developmental regression. So we know this is having an impact on our kids. And I think that that is what is most critical, especially at that point of development when we have our young minds that are developing and they're experiencing this stress that they don't quite have the words to describe. Now, as a result of seeing all of this activity happen across the state of California, I introduced 2 bills. Our first bill that we actually introduced back in December, that was in partnership with several students, undocumented students from the UC system, was SB 98. That is the Sending Alerts to Families and Education Act, or the SAFE Act. And then the second bill, SB 805, the No Vigilantes Act, was a bill that I introduced after we saw ICE raids begin here in Southern California. And we began to see operations where individuals were not wearing any sort of identification, no badge. They were coming out of unmarked vehicles. And these basically looked like vigilantes kidnapping people. And they were wearing these masks, oftentimes ball caps and sunglasses. So you really could not even identify whether this person was a federal immigration officer, as they were claiming to be, or if they were just a random person from off of the street. So first and foremost, both of these bills were signed into office, which I'm very, very proud of. These are actually my first 2 bills to ever become law by the governor, so it was really special to have this happen. He held a signing ceremony last weekend at Miguel Contreras Learning Center, which was also an important place because there was a student that was actually taken by immigration enforcement from that school. And so him really locating it there, I think, was really important. And it's a huge, predominantly Latino school as well. It serves over 80% Latino students. And at this bill signing, he signed both SB 98 and SB 805. So SB 98, what this bill will be doing is requiring K through 12 schools and higher education institutions to issue alerts if immigration enforcement authorities are present on campus, similar to warning systems in place for other campus emergencies. Now, many of our school districts have developed technology like this already. Unfortunately, we've seen a rise in whether it is school shootings or other types of threatening events on campus. And so we wanted to make it a requirement for all school districts to immediately notify parents if for some reason immigration enforcement is present on campus, and to clearly communicate what is happening. In addition to that, for our higher education institutions, both our colleges and universities, that notification will go out to students as well. So any student that's over 18 will receive that message too. We think timely notification is a really important part of communicating as these events are happening. And ensuring that families are going to be notified in a timely manner. And finally, I want to mention these notifications also go to school staff as well. So teachers, professors, staff that are working on campus, we know that these are folks that also need to receive this information too. Now, this bill is dovetailing really nicely with another bill, and that's AB 49, which I'm proud to co-author. AB 49 is going to require that if immigration enforcement comes onto a school district campus, they have to have a judicial warrant. They have to provide proper documentation. They cannot just access a school district. And we think that that's also incredibly critical, as well as not sharing school data with federal authorities. And so both of those bills were signed into law on the same day. Now, our next bill, SB 805, the No Vigilantes Act, is a companion legislation with SB 627, which is the No Secret Police Act. This is a partnership between myself and Senator Scott Wiener, who is a budget chair and represents the city of San Francisco. My bill is requiring identification for ICE agents. And what it is saying is any law enforcement agent operating in the state of California, including federal immigration enforcement, must wear a name ID. They must identify the department that they are with, and they also must provide a badge number if it is requested of them by a member of the public. In addition to that, we had heard several stories from community members and those that had been detained by ICE that they had overheard conversations of these officers talking about receiving cash payments in exchange for arrest. And so we have been monitoring this very closely. There's been lots of discussions about the possible use of bounty hunters in immigration enforcement activity. Our bill states very clearly that here in California, bounty hunters cannot be used for immigration enforcement, that is breaking the law. Now, this bill is incredibly important and critical for a number of reasons, and I would say probably the biggest one is accountability. You all may have seen recently, there's a viral video coming out of the state of New York of a ICE agent actually throwing a woman to the ground, the wife of somebody that is an immigrant who is he's in the courthouse and is on his pathway to try to become a citizen, and she's begging the officer to not arrest her husband, and he very violently and aggressively throws her to the ground. We've seen these types of events take place here in California as well, and frankly, it is unacceptable. And these folks have to be held accountable. But it is hard to do that if someone's wearing a mask and not identifying themselves with a name and ID number. So we need to have that structure in place so that there's an accountability system. Now, the other companion bill to this bill, SB 627, which is Senator Scott Wiener's bill, will require that all law enforcement operating in the state of California cannot wear ski masks. And so we've seen many of these agents walking around with masks that are up to here, cloth masks. And so it clearly says that that is not allowed. Now, what happens if these bills are violated? I think that that's also, a question we've received a lot as well. So with both SB 627 as well as SB 805, it turns the violation of these bills into a misdemeanor. So if federal immigration agents are not following these laws, they are breaking the law, and that is a criminal offense. And this will also allow us to better track when these events happen. In addition to that, it says that if somebody is taken, if they are, I forgot the term for it. If they are violently abducted, or if they are violently thrown to the ground, that person can then file for up to $10,000 in penalties, and that's a minimum of $10,000. If there is more than that, you can also file for those damages as well if that case does happen and that individual is wearing a mask. And so that enforcement mechanism, I think, is going to be very important for us to be utilizing. We know already Kristi Noem, as well as President Trump, has stated that they are not going to be following this law. And so we anticipated that that was going to happen. And so we knew we had to build strong enforcement mechanisms into this piece of legislation. Other bills that I want to highlight that I had talked about, AB 49, which I mentioned, this California Safe Haven Schools Act. I mentioned SB 627, but I also want to mention SB 81, which is ensuring safe healthcare spaces. Now, this is a bill that will require judicial warrants for any immigration enforcement officers that are trying to access hospitals. Now, this became an incredibly important bill for me because you may have read about or seen in the news an event that happened in Glendale back on the 4th of July. We had immigration enforcement officers that had arrested a woman who immediately began having a medical emergency. They delayed her access to care, but after she repeatedly kept asking them, they took her to Glendale Memorial and then refused to leave her bedside. And it became a very difficult interaction between both the immigration officers as well as the nurses and the doctors that were there trying to treat the patient. They ultimately had to move her into another room in order to separate her from the officers. And really their behavior just in that situation, their interaction was incredibly inappropriate. It was inhumane and just extremely, extremely alarming. And so Senator Arreguín had brought SB 81 forward, and I had shared with him this event. We began working very closely on this bill so we can make very clear that when somebody is in a hospital receiving treatment, that you cannot just come in and just force your way into the hospital, that is illegal, that is inappropriate, and really violates the standard of care that we should be providing to all patients when they come into a hospital setting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the legal actions that are being led by our incredible Attorney General, Rob Bonta, because he has been hard at work. Let me tell you, we have filed over 25 plus lawsuits as a state. We've won a majority of them, and that is really thanks to him and his team. And really that is your tax dollars at work. We allocated more funding to the Attorney General's office to make sure that we would be prepared for this federal administration, and I'm very glad we did. He has helped to unfreeze grant funding that has been frozen by the federal administration, has helped to push back on funding that was withheld so that the Trump administration could try to push very conservative policies onto California. It has been, our legal pathways have been an incredibly effective way for us to fight back against this administration. He's focused on an overview of pivotal lawsuits, including efforts to uphold birthright citizenship and defend healthcare access to Dreamers, among others. And there's legal initiatives that underscore the critical role of the justice system that are safeguarding immigrant rights. And so, our AG has been hard at work. We have a very close partnership with the AG's office, been doing Know Your Rights workshops for community members, and has just been such a tremendous asset in this fight against the Trump administration. An update on the birthright citizenship case. January 2025, the AG co-led a lawsuit challenging President Trump's executive order aimed at ending birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants, arguing it violated the 14th Amendment. And the legal action asserted that states would be irreparably harmed if the policy took effect. On July of 2025, a district court reaffirmed the nationwide injunction, ensuring the Trump's executive order remained blocked while the litigation proceeds. So we are still very much in this fight with the federal administration. In terms of protecting healthcare access for Dreamers, in January, the AG also joined a multi-state coalition, and we have been working so closely with other blue states across the country to respond to many of these archaic actions by the federal administration to defend a Biden administration rule that made deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA as is commonly known, recipients eligible to participate in the Affordable Care Act marketplace. In July of 2025, AG Bonta sued the Trump administration for illegally sharing sensitive Medicaid recipient data with U.S. and Immigration Customs Enforcement. For immigration enforcement, you may have heard about that. There is data sharing that's been happening both with ICE as well as even with the IRS, all of which we are incredibly concerned about. We know many of our undocumented folks in California file for taxes using ITIN numbers. And so it feels as though this administration is punishing them for doing the right thing, which has been completely absurd and frustrating. In August of 2025, Legal Action successfully secured a preliminary injunction to block the sharing of California's Medicaid data with federal immigration enforcement authorities. So that is us, protecting your information, protecting the public's information from ICE, from this federal administration. Last, I want to talk about recent actions in July 2025. We filed a lawsuit and secured a temporary court order against the Trump administration directive that restricted access to federal programs like Head Start for families in California and in other states. And in September 2025, AG Bonta secured a final ruling blocking the Trump administration from illegally withholding critical public safety funding from states. The funding was being illegally conditioned on state assistance with federal immigration enforcement. Once again, this style of withholding funding that we've seen in order to push these very conservative policies. Now, I want to talk a little bit about local efforts as well, because there's been so much work happening here on the ground. There's over a dozen cities across Southern California that have united in a legal effort against the Trump administration, alleging that recent immigration raids disproportionately target individuals based on race and ethnicity, and the city of Pasadena is a part of that lawsuit. Very proud to have them be a part of this lawsuit that helped to secure the temporary restraining order against the roving raids. And now we know the Supreme Court overturned that but I really want to emphasize to each and every one of you that that fight is not over, and that we are going to continue pushing. We are working very closely with the ACLU, and we'll have updates within the next month or so. But I want to make clear that just because the Supreme Court ruled that the TRO will not be in place anymore does not mean that this fight against these discriminatory raids has ended. It is going to continue. In addition to that, federal efforts, we've seen U.S. Senator Alex Padilla introduce immigration-related bills. You may have heard about the Visible Act. U.S. Senator Padilla actually based this policy off of both my bill and Senator Scott Wiener's bill. This is a bill that would require all immigration enforcement officers to not wear masks, to display ID, and to make sure that they are identifying the department that they're with. So we really appreciate his efforts in bringing this forward, but also recognize the huge uphill battle that he is facing, given that we have a Republican-controlled House, Senate, and executive branch. So, we're hoping come 2026 that with our elections, we can give our representatives more help by electing more Democrats to office that are able to support these initiatives. I wanted to highlight some of the resources for immigration support that we have here in the community. Local organizations such as the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHIRLA, that many of you are probably familiar with, the National Day Laborers Organizing Network, or NDLON, that works directly with our day laborers that we see at places like Home Depot, that we see at car washes, and the ACLU of Southern California, who's been doing tremendous work. And I just want to highlight highlight, for those of you that may not know, these organizations actually have such strong ties to the San Gabriel Valley. And Helica Salas, who is the executive director of Chirla, lives here in Pasadena and is such a leader in this space. You've probably seen the work that she has been doing, and she has been nonstop a fighter for our immigrant communities. But she is from right here at home in Pasadena, and that makes me so incredibly proud. From the ACLU of Southern California, Muhammad Taysar, who is the lead attorney representing the roving raids case and fighting back. He was the one that secured that temporary restraining order. He is actually from Altadena. And Endalon, several of their leaders, including Pablo, who many of you have met, is from right here in the San Gabriel Valley as well. And so we have just such a wealth of resources here in our community and really leaders in this space that are fighting back against these discriminatory immigration raids. And I think for me, that gives me such a source of pride. I hope it gives all of you such a source of pride that the people that are leading this fight are from right here in your community. I just wanted to share out some of this information for you all, and feel free to take photos or take notes. This is just websites for assistance, whether it is legal assistance, whether it's referral lines. We have rapid response networks that are working around the clock. When somebody sees a raid or they see something suspicious related to immigration, they can report that, and our community works together to make sure that we're responding, we're getting resources out. I regularly utilize these resources. Our team works very close with the Rapid Response Network, and when we receive reports of individuals that have been taken during raids or people that need help, we're able to connect them with legal resources through these various organizations. And then wanted to just highlight some Know Your Rights pieces that I think are really important, because we always want to continue to emphasize and repeat this to members of our community. Do not open your door if immigration enforcement shows up unless they have a judicial warrant. You do not need to open your door to anyone. Keep your door shut. Ask to see the warrant. You need to see your name on it. You want to see a judge's signature. And if they can't provide you that paperwork, you do not need to let them into your home. Remain silent. Don't disclose your immigration status unless they provide that information to you and they verify that they are actually an immigration officer and they have the proper information to be there. Document any ICE interaction safely. You have the right to record, whether it is through video, whether it's through audio, and we should do that. We're discovering that these recordings are actually incredibly important tools to capturing either violent events that are happening, to hold folks accountable, or to document these things, to report them later on to rapid response networks that are actively tracking as these raids are occurring across the Los Angeles and Southern California area. And also there's the Know Your Rights cards. Some of you have probably seen them. They're red cards. We have some here today. Excellent. If you don't have one, please pick one up. Keep them in your wallet. They're very small. Give them to friends, give them to neighbors. If you have loved ones in your life that you know that are undocumented, empowering them to know their rights is incredibly important during this time. And then wanted to highlight some of the collaborative efforts that we've been doing for advocacy and support, supporting the vital work of local advocacy organizations that protect immigrant rights is so incredibly important during this time period. Chirla and these other organizations are receiving attacks on all ends. We have had Republican members of the legislature try to call for audits of them, try to withhold funding from them, state funding for them, that we provide to them so that they could do the good work of supporting our immigrant communities. We've had Republican members of Congress that have launched attacks against CHIRLA. And so your support of those organizations, it makes a difference. They need it now more than ever. We as a team also, we attend workshops and training sessions to learn about immigration protections, legal rights, how to respond to enforcement actions. We also host those workshops in partnership with CHIRLA and with the ACLU. We're going to be doing another workshop very soon in the southern part of my district. I represent one of the largest Asian American communities in Southern California, in the Western San Gabriel Valley, areas like Monterey Park, Alhambra, Rosemead, Temple City. This is also a community that's been hit incredibly hard. We have a large number of undocumented Asian immigrants that are very scared right now. So we're going to be working to provide some resources to them in language to make sure they have correct supports. I'll go ahead and I'll stop here.
I really appreciate the statistics about who's a criminal and all that. And how do you answer, the head of ICE when he says anyone that's here in the United States illegally is already a criminal? I mean, that he's just saying that. Well, obviously they're all criminals. So how do you respond to that?
I liken the issue with documentation status, right? It is actually not a criminal violation. It is a civil violation, and it would be the equivalent of your license expiring, right? And if any one of us, right, your license could expire, maybe you miss the notification in the mail, and so you get a ticket to fix it, and you don't get arrested and sent to a detention center, and there's no equivalent there. So I think it's important for folks to understand that, and even the violation and what we refer to it as, it is not a criminal violation. And so being really clear about that with folks is important. And unless we're going to suddenly rewrite our laws to say, if the tags on your car expire, that you're going to sit, in prison for several months, then, I don't think it's appropriate for us to do that with civil violations.
I'm an emerita professor from Cal State Los Angeles, and we have a large contingent of dreamers.
Yes.
And of students of all colors. Many are undocumented. And just this past week, the university was subpoenaed by some organization. I was trying to look up the letters for you, asking for, or not asking, but directing that they wanted the names and the email addresses and the telephone numbers of every employee at Cal State LA. That's scary.
Yeah. Yes, it has been incredibly horrifying to see the attacks on our educational institutions and on our higher ed institutions in particular. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that we've seen this request be made. UC Berkeley received a similar request. You may have seen UC Berkeley in the news around this, and it's being done through the guise of investigating anti-Semitism. What has been incredibly troubling about this is when they are doing their investigations into anti-Semitism, they request large numbers of documents. But what they've begun to do is request that none of those documents be redacted. And so they're asking for personal information in that process. So UC Berkeley went through this and was in this kind of very odd situation and felt as though they did not have the legal grounds in order to deny their request to not redact those documents. And so instead, what UC Berkeley did is identified any person mentioned in any of those documents to warn them they're requesting these things from us. We're not sure why or what they're going to do with it, but we want you to know that you're mentioned. And that obviously caused a lot of chaos and concern. We're having active conversations, especially because I chair the Senate Education Committee, about what we can do to close loopholes in the law to better protect faculty and students that are on campus, and to give them a better legal standing to be able to deny requests when they're asking for that kind of personal information.
I have a question. The Trump administration and the ICE people, they're not really, they don't care about our laws and about the laws that you have put through. So how do we get around that? I mean, how do we get that information? I don't feel like they're going to take off their masks and put an ID badge on them. So how can we fight that? How can we get information so that justice can be done?
So there are two main ways that we are holding them accountable to the law. So first of all, they violate this law, it becomes a misdemeanor, right? And that allows us a tool to better be able to track when these individuals are wearing masks, when they are not identifying who they are, they're operating in plain clothes. So having that data is going to be very valuable. And it's local law enforcement and state law enforcement that is going to be doing this policing. Part of what my bill says very clearly is that if these folks are masked, if they're not identifying who they are, our local law enforcement must investigate, because there could be criminal activity afoot. And if somebody is hopping out of an unmarked vehicle and a t-shirt and jeans with a gun and telling me that they need to take this person away because they're claiming to be ICE, and I have no way to verify whether or not that person is telling the truth, that poses a danger to society, that poses a danger to public safety. And so our local police agencies actually requested this of me. This is why I authored this bill, to make it very clear that they must investigate. Now, this puts us in a very odd situation, right? I mean, you have police basically potentially investigating police, but it's something that I believe we have to do. In addition to that, I mentioned the damages piece. If someone is falsely imprisoned, or if they are violently attacked, if they are hurt in the process of being detained, they'll be able to fight back and basically through a private right of action sue for damages. And the minimum that they'll be able to receive is $10,000. And it will go up from there depending on what those damages are. And so we tried to create both financial penalties as well as legal penalties, and also define out who investigates in these situations, because it's been very hard. I've talked one-on-one with police chiefs, with local law enforcement, who feel like they're in a very odd and strange situation when these events used to happen and immigration enforcement would arrive in our communities. When I was the mayor of a city, I can tell you the federal government would actually reach out to our local cities and say, this is what's happening, this is the operation that's going to be occurring. They wouldn't give us all the details, right? Because that's private information, but they would give us some sense of what would be occurring. So if we received questions from members of the public, we could answer them. That's no longer happening, and that's a real problem. Mm-hmm.
Well, I can appreciate that it looks like we have the right person in the right place at the right time. And I appreciate the young people in the room. I have a grandniece who, just for fun, she doesn't even have a history class this year, but she bought the book, paperback, Strong Men, and I just opened the book and saw wonderful authors' names and books that they've written talking about strong men. So I commend it as a resource, and I just encourage us to pay attention. And I know I'm not alone valuing public radio, national public radio and TV, because I do trust those news sources. So this is serious. Fascism, call it what it is. So thank you.
Hello. I've been visiting at Adelanto, and I heard there has been a recent death there of a young man, a 39-year-old man. And I'm hearing that they can request medical care, but that it's been put off. It's like bureaucratic, and it's like by the time they actually get the medical care, I mean, this young man died.
Yeah.
And the other situation is, and I don't know if this is true, I was told by one of the detainees that there is a young man in there who was granted asylum 8 months ago, but he still continues to stay at Adelanto. And I don't know if you've heard of that situation or what we can do about either of those situations. Thank you.
I had not heard about the second situation, the man that had been granted asylum that has still been there. I am familiar with the gentleman who passed away just a few days ago. We've been tracking those that have died as a result of immigration enforcement very closely. And the one of the gentlemen who actually died as a result of ICE raids, Roberto Carlos, is a resident of Monrovia and was killed at a Monrovia Home Depot. And so it is something that I think is important for us to talk about in terms of the impacts that this is having on people's lives, and that there is a cost to this, that people are dying as a result. I, have heard from activists and also spoken with our Congresswoman Judy Chu, and she has shared with me that the detention centers, the inside of the detention centers, and the way that people are being treated when they are being detained is abhorrent. That these detention centers are not being kept clean, that people are being delayed medical treatment. And it has been incredibly, incredibly alarming. They have repeatedly denied access to Adelanto and other detention centers to members of Congress who have the right to be able to access these places. I actually joined Congresswoman Judy Chu to join a family who had their father that was taken here in Pasadena at a bus stop. And I watched as the staff at the detention center quite literally waited for the Congresswoman to leave before they opened the door. We stood there for an hour, and then I waited another 30 minutes after. And after the Congresswoman left, that's when they opened the door. And I, because I'm a state senator and not a federal member of Congress, do not have access to those facilities in the same way. And so then talked with the staff there and said, look, we have his wife here. She has his diabetic medication. She needs to get inside and to deliver these meds. And they finally allowed her to go in, and I waited outside with her children. But I think that's just an example of the games that are being played, because they recognize that their facilities are not being operated correctly, that they are violating human rights with the way that they're operating these facilities. And there's already been several lawsuits brought forward, by groups like Disability Rights California, because immigrant members of our community that are disabled are being heavily mistreated as well. And so this is going to continue to be an ongoing effort. We've had conversations with Chirla, about this and what I can do as a state representative in these situations, how we can better hold these facilities accountable, because even though they are federal facilities, they are operating in the state of California. So it is very much an ongoing discussion, and we're working very closely with our civil rights partners on this.
We're kind of out of time here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.